Why would I do such a crazy thing, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you. The first time I gave up caffeine, I didn't actually intend for it to be long term. I was having some severe reflux and gastrointestinal issues related to anxiety, and the doctor told me, this is a list of things you should not be eating or drinking in order to improve that symptom. And caffeine was one of the things on that list. So for a short period of time, I did give it up, and it wasn't great. But honestly, I was in such a bad mental state back then that I really don't remember what the consequences were. I do remember that I went back to drinking coffee and tea not long after and continued to do so for a little bit longer. But then when I was coming out of that bout of anxiety and learning more about what can cause anxiety, I saw caffeine popping up over and over again. And I just had the thought, what if I gave it up? I wonder what would happen. So one day, and honestly, I can't remember the exact date, but I feel like it was somewhere in the middle of the year. The only reason I actually remember what year it was is because I made a Facebook post like a month or two afterwards, sharing my experiences so far. And so I can kind of look back on that and I know approximately when it was. But basically, I just decided to give it up. Now, I have been drinking coffee or tea since as long as I can remember, since I was a kid, definitely, because tea drinking, black tea drinking, my parents always drank tea, everyone around us always drank tea, and as I got older, I always drank tea, and then I started drinking coffee as well. So there had literally never been a time in my adult life where I wasn't caffeinated. Apart from that short period, but my anxiety was so bad back then, I didn't know what was going on. One day, I just went cold turkey, and I put down the coffee, and I put down the tea, and I decided to see what would happen. Honestly, the first day was kind of okay, but the second day, man, I have never felt like that before in my life. I literally laid on the couch all day. I had no energy. I felt like I was in this half asleep fugue state the whole time, and it was like being a zombie. But the next day, I pretty much got back to normal. It didn't take that long to get through that. Now, I wasn't a serious heavy coffee drinker. I would probably usually have maybe 4 cups of black tea a day with the occasional coffee in there. So for people who are drinking like multiple cups of espresso coffee a day, it might be a slightly different situation. You might have more detoxing to do. But for me, it was that one day, it was bad, and then it was over. Now, I'll give you some caveats here. I do have occasionally when I go out to a cafe, a cup of decaf coffee, but decaf coffee has 97% less caffeine than a regular cup of coffee, or at least it should. And I also will indulge occasionally in a piece of dark chocolate, but I always keep it small, and I try not to have it later at night because I know there is a small amount of caffeine in that as well. So I'm not a complete angel because I love decaf coffee because I love the taste of coffee, and a good decaf coffee, as far as I'm concerned, tastes exactly the same as a normal one. And chocolate, well, I'm not a monster. I'm not giving up chocolate. And since then, I've never looked back, and I never really want caffeine. Sure, there'll be the occasional day where I'm really tired and the thought will cross my mind, if I had a cup of coffee, what would happen? But I get through it and I get on with it, and I realize that I really don't need that drug to keep me going. These days, I'm just as, if not more, productive and energized than I was when I regularly ingested caffeine. Frankly, my energy is far more smooth. I don't have those dips in energy that you have when you ingest caffeine regularly, where you need to top up your reserves, otherwise your brain starts getting tired because there's less caffeine to fill up the receptors that keep you awake. Now, that being said, I do of course make sure to prioritize my sleep, to get regular exercise, and make sure that I'm doing everything I can with the rest of my life to make sure that I have enough energy for my work and my lifestyle. I don't get wild energy fluctuations anymore. I don't get anxiety or jitters anymore. In fact, I have had 0 anxiety since I gave up caffeine. Now, I'm not saying that it is all down to caffeine, because there have been periods in my life where I've been pretty much fine, and there have been periods in my life where I've had very severe anxiety. I tend to experience it as an illness, so I get sick with anxiety for a period of time and then I get well again. That being said, there always seemed to be a slight undercurrent of anxiety in my life before I gave up caffeine, and since then It's just not there anymore. There's a lot of research around this, and this may or may not work for you depending on how sensitive you are to caffeine. Some people, depending on your genetics, are simply more sensitive than others. I think we often forget how powerful of a drug caffeine actually is, and I had this hit home for me once because I accidentally drank proper coffee instead of decaf. So it's when we were in Canada in 2019, and we were in a shop and there was a beautiful salted caramel decaf coffee, and I said to my friend, we must pick up some of that on the way out, and then we got distracted and looked through the rest of the shop, and then we came back and saw the packets and went, oh yep, grabbed it, bought it, went back to the Airbnb, brewed a pot, and I had a big cup of what I thought was decaf coffee. Fast forward to about 9 o'clock at night. I was wired. I didn't even realize what was going on. I was jittery, I was energized. I was like, I really want to go for a walk. I want to go down to the 7-Eleven and grab a donut because I'm really hungry and I really feel like some sugar right now. And everyone with me was like, what is going on with you? This is really weird behavior. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just go have a bit more of that lovely salted caramel decaf coffee. So I walked over and I had a look and my eyes went to the packet. And that's when I realized that it wasn't decaf coffee. Thankfully, before I took another cupful of it into me. And then at that moment, all became clear and I realized why I felt so agitated. That was a really good lesson for me as to why I never want to go back to drinking caffeine again. It just felt awful. Frankly, you really don't understand the impact of ingesting a stimulant all your waking hours for your entire life until you stop. Okay, so let's just briefly touch on some of the benefits and some of the downsides of caffeine, because there are benefits to it. If you can tolerate it, it might be worthwhile still drinking it for these reasons. Obviously, it can increase alertness, which is why most people drink coffee. It can give you that false sense of energy, because it's not real energy, because real energy comes from being well rested, but it's a false sense of energy that can at least keep you going if you need it. It can improve your memory and your athletic performance. In fact, a lot of people who are sports people or who train a lot like to take caffeine before their workout as a pre-workout stimulant, and it works really well for that. There's also scientific evidence that regular caffeine intake can actually reduce the risk of some cancers and some liver disease. So there are definitely some health benefits that are associated with caffeine use. However, if you're someone like me who is extra sensitive to caffeine, the benefits might not outweigh the risks. So some of the risks are obviously increased anxiety, which comes along with heart palpitations caused by the caffeine, which can kind of feed into each other. There's the jitters, the jittery feeling you feel when you drink too much caffeine, or if you're sensitive, not very much at all. There's obviously disturbed sleep. If you are drinking caffeine too close to bedtime or you have too much in your system, it has quite a long half-life. It's in your system for a long time. It can literally stop you from falling into a proper deep sleep, and therefore you never get well rested, and then you need more coffee so you can stay awake, and it's a vicious cycle. It can increase your blood pressure, so if you already have high blood pressure, then it's not a great idea either. It can cause nausea and GI issues, especially for those people who do have reflux. It's not great. It can actually make that worse. And finally, this is a personal one, but I know there are other people out there who feel like that as well. I just don't like the idea of being dependent on a drug to live my everyday life. So if this video has piqued your interest and you're thinking that you might like to give it a go, I encourage you to do so. Just a few tips though before you do. Number one, expect withdrawals and plan for it. So make sure to stop on like a Friday so you have a weekend, and make sure it's not a busy weekend. So you have at least a full weekend to go through the withdrawal process, which varies from person to person, but it probably will happen. I'd also say have a substitute drink ready to go, because the habit of actually drinking the hot coffee is something that will be hard to break, as well as giving up the caffeine itself. So substitute it for a herbal tea or some other sort of non-caffeinated beverage. Yes, this means you can't drink green tea or black tea or any sort of caffeinated tea. It has to be herbal with no caffeine in it. Maybe even hot milk with honey or something like that. Personally, my replacement tea was vanilla rooibos tea with a little bit of honey or xylitol in it and some milk, and that is literally my tea now. That is what I drink all the time, except when I'm fasting, in which case I drink plain herbal teas. I'll still have the same tea, just without milk or sweetener in it. Remember, during this detox period, avoid anything with caffeine. So that means avoiding chocolate. I know, I'm sorry. And also decaf tea during this phase. They're definitely things you can consider reintroducing once you're used to being free of caffeine. And you may even find that you get a slight effect from those because your body is much more sensitive to it after giving it up. But if anxiety is something you struggle with, or any of the other negatives I talked about, then I do encourage you to try it. I know a lot of people, and I have people in my life who are the same, are just like, Jess, I just can't do it. I need coffee to survive. I need it to function. And to which I say, maybe you do now, but you probably wouldn't if you gave it up. So if you do, let me know in the comments below. I advise you to try it for a month. Give it up for a full month and see how you go, because that helps you get through the withdrawal period and helps you actually function for a little while and see what life is like without caffeine. If you've given it up, also tell me how it went for you. What was your experience? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to connect with other people who've gone through this and hear your thoughts on the process. If you enjoyed this one, give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like more videos on how to have a healthy and productive work from home lifestyle, and of course, if you're a handmade business owner like me as well, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my future videos. Now, if anxiety is something you struggle with, you might like to check out this video where I share my own story of overcoming anxiety and how I healed it and prevent it from coming back in my own life. I hope you enjoy that one. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon. Bye for now.